This video focuses on how do I start the process to become a third-party IATF 16949 auditor. Many of you watching this YouTube channel may aspire to become an IATF 16949 third-party auditor in the future. This video focuses on how to start the journey. Niall, I understand that currently there are about 3,500 active IATF auditors. Is that about correct?
That is about correct, Paul. I'd say there's probably around 3,200. It's probably the latest number. And again, they're distributed around the globe. We have within that population of auditors, some that are full-time working for one IATF recognised certification body, and they could be doing, a high number of audits per year. Sometimes even up to sort of 200 audit days a year. And then there'll be others that are working on a sort of part-time associate or contract basis, again, for IATF recognised certification bodies, but maybe doing a lower number of audit days per year. And I think, with the age profile of existing auditors, I know that certification bodies are often looking to bring new people in with the appropriate backgrounds to develop as IATF 16949 third-party auditors.
Right, okay. And let's explore that a little bit more then, the appropriate background. So what are the entry requirements in terms of qualification and work experience to enter then this IATF 16949 qualification process?
Again, a good question, Paul. So the entry requirements are defined in the rules, the scheme rules, section 4.1. And actually, they have been through a sanctioned interpretation. So there has been a change to the published auditor entry requirements. And you can see, again, from the IATF Global Oversight website, you can look at the sanctioned interpretation number 1 associated with the rules. And that will give you all of the information, all of the entry requirements. The first key thing I would say is the candidate has to be sponsored by an IATF recognised certification body. But yeah, in short, the candidate needs 4 years full-time practical experience. And within that period, 2 years need to be dedicated to quality assurance or some quality management activity. And that has to have occurred within the past 15 years in ideally an automotive manufacturing organisation. Although it's worth pointing out that other relevant industry experience would be considered.
Right. Okay. And I think, that explanation you've given aligns it with sanction interpretation number 1, where the original rules were changed to reflect what you've told us. So apart then from the relevant work experience, what else is needed to enter the qualification process?
The candidate must also be qualified according to ISO IEC 17021 and the relevant accreditation body rules to perform ISO 9001 audits. And again, they need to have conducted at least 6 ISO 9001 third-party audits in manufacturing industries, with at least 3 of those with them as the audit team leader. Again, it's important they have to be sponsored by an IATF recognised certification body. They need to be competent in ISO 17021, and they need to have undertaken a minimum number of ISO 9001 audits.
Do those audits then, do they have to have been done within the third-party certification process, or would it be considered that internal or second-party audits may be adequate?
The expectation would be that they are third-party audits. There is a note that gives a little bit of flexibility to allow first and second party audit experience to be factored in, but it's equally worth saying it would be unusual for an auditor candidate not to have done third-party 9001 audits before they join the new auditor training
Right.
program.
So that really is the expectation then, that the person will already be engaged with a certification body undertaking ISO 9001 audits, that they've done at least 6 of those. The probability is they would have done more of those. And I think there's also the requirement that they have to have the automotive related experience in terms of understanding the application of the automotive core tools.
That's a really important point, actually, Paul, that again, the entry requirements define that as a prerequisite. The candidate must be knowledgeable in the automotive core tools. And that is a fundamental part of the IATF auditor qualification process and a key element of any IATF audit.
Okay, so if we just reflect where we've got to, that they have to have work experience, they have to have audit experience, they have to have experience of applying and knowledge of the automotive core tools. If a candidate meets those requirements, then what happens next?
They would need to approach one of the IATF recognised certification bodies, and the full list of those IATF recognised certification bodies can be found on the IATF Global Oversight website, and you can find from there contact details, including in some cases job openings. Certification bodies will find auditors that they need in a particular region, for example.
So I think you have stressed a couple of times that people can't progress in this process unless they have been sponsored by one of the IATF qualified certification bodies. Let's assume that the candidate has got that sponsorship then. What happens next in the process?
The certification body, and again, it's important to stress that applications for third-party auditor training always come through the certification body to the relevant IATF Oversight Office or training organisation. The Oversight Office, again, I'm sort of speaking on behalf of SMMT, the Oversight Office will review the application and supporting information. And again, it's important to stress that evidence must be provided as part of the application across those entry requirements that we've mentioned. And if approved to enter the process by the Oversight Office, then the candidate will be given access to what we call in the IATF world, the ADP, the Auditor Development Process. And that opens up to the candidate some pre-study activity. So it allows them to go through a number of pre-study requirements, including some quizzes that will help prepare them for the next stage on the process. And I think the other key expectation is that the candidate must also observe at least one IATF third-party audit before they attend the new auditor training course.
Yeah, I knew that was something that had been added, to really better prepare the auditors coming into the training and qualification. Now, I understand from what I've read that there have been some changes in the training and qualification process. Can you explain those changes, Niall?
Absolutely, Paul. And both you and I have been involved in these changes, and this is all part of the IATF COVID response. And so what we will have, and we're sort of piloting this at the moment, but from the beginning of next year, IATF have developed a 4-day training program. And that's either delivered as a live virtual event or face-to-face. And that obviously depends very much on the COVID restrictions. At the end of that 4-day training, and I'm not just saying this, but it is, I think, a really good course. It's got a great mix of interactive case study based activities, group work. And from what I've seen of the pilots that we've done, the application that we use to support the training works really well to get everyone engaged. It's still not quite the same as face-to-face, but it comes very close. And then after they've been through that 4-day training course, they then become enabled to move on to the next stage. And the next stage is their assessment. This is what we call their ADP initial assessment. And that has to happen between 1 and 3 months after their training.
Right. And I'm sure some of the listeners then would just like a little insight about what is covered in this knowledge and application exam. I'm sure you can't tell them the exact questions, but the structure of the exam.
Yeah, so it's an online assessment, and it covers a number of knowledge and application modules. So there's a number of knowledge assessments that look at knowledge of IATF 16949 rules, and then core tool areas of SPC, MSA, FMEA. So there's a knowledge portion, and then there's an application portion, which is much more geared up to the audit process itself. And again, for the application portion, we are assessing candidates across their application of IATF 16949, their application of the rules, their application of process approach, which incorporates risk-based thinking. We're assessing them against NC management, non-conformity management, and auditing customer-specific requirements and core tools. So there are 5 competency areas for knowledge, right. 5 competency areas for application.
Right, that sounds a pretty intense day. And then if an organisation meets the IATF minimum criteria then for the knowledge and application exam, what happens next?
So assuming they meet the minimum criteria, so they essentially what we would consider score yellow or green, and again the scoring criteria is defined in a publicly available CB communique, which again can be accessed from Global Oversight website. If they meet the minimum requirements, then they become a qualified auditor. They get an auditor qualification with a predefined amount of time, again, depending on their results, to give them time to, if they need to move from yellow to green in their results. But basically they get a couple of years to carry on doing their audits, developing their approach, and then they will come back for a requalification event. And Paul, just while I think about it, it's a sort of advert, I suppose, but it's one of what I would call the unsung IATF publications, the IATF Auditor Guide. Anybody that's interested, and to be honest, this applies to existing auditors as much as new auditor candidates, but anyone interested in becoming a third-party IATF auditor, I'd really recommend they look to the IATF Auditor Guide, which is again available to buy from the IATF Global Oversight website.
No, so thanks for sharing that, Niall. We do hope to see some of you on some of the future qualification courses.
Yeah.
The rules for achieving IATF recognition, along with the relevant sanction interpretations, define the qualification requirements to become an IATF 16949 third-party auditor. To begin the qualification process, as Niall mentioned, the candidates have to be sponsored by an IATF certification body, and they have to meet all the pre-qualification requirements. Once approved, candidates must complete the relevant pre-study materials and observe at least one IATF 16949 third-party audit. Once they've done that, then they can participate in the 4-day training program, followed up within 1 to 3 months with the ADP knowledge and application exam. If they meet the minimum criteria from that exam, and after they've had a successful internal witness audit, they can begin the career as an IATF 16949 third-party auditor.